Hello and welcome. I'm Asuma Kataoka and you are watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories. Iran vows more devastating strikes after deadly attacks on Israel, which responded by targeting Iranian missile sites. As tensions rise, Iran rejects talks under fire. Trump backs Israel but suggests a fight may be inevitable, while the EU calls for a negotiated solution. A 57-year-old suspect posing as a police officer has been arrested for the politically motivated killing of Minnesota Democratic lawmaker Melissa Hortman and her husband, as well as for shooting State Senator John Hoffman and his wife. Police have also found 3 AK-47s and a 9mm handgun and a list of public officials in suspects' SUV. French President Emmanuel Macron, the first foreign leader to visit Greenland since Trump's annexation threats. He vowed strong EU ties, faster metal cooperation, rejected Greenland's sale, questioned Russia's role in Iran-Israel crisis, and backed Arctic military drills. Trump orders an immigration crackdown focused on Democratic strongholds, calling for expanded detention and deportation efforts in major cities like Los Angeles, Chicago, and New York. 4 armed men stormed Mayor Lilia Garcia's office in southern Mexico on Sunday, killing her and a staff member and wounding 2 police officers after threatening security at the scene. An Air India Boeing 787 Dreamliner bound for New Delhi returned to Hong Kong mid-air after the pilot reported a suspected technical issue, according to reports. EU Chief Ursula von der Leyen says Netanyahu has promised to boost aid into Gaza as Israel identifies the second hostage body recovered last week as Aviv Atzili, kidnapped during Hamas October 7, 2023 attacks. As G7 leaders met in remote Kananaskis, hundreds protested peacefully in Calgary over Gaza, U.S. influence, and climate issues with their messages live-streamed to the summit. U.S. President Donald Trump and other world leaders have arrived in Canada for the G7 summit, where the intensifying Iran-Israel conflict is expected to top the agenda. On the sidelines of the summit, Canadian Prime Minister also met British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese, South African President Cyril Ramaphosa, and the German Chancellor Friedrich Merz. With Starmer, Carney is said to have discussed the tensions in West Asia and their support for Ukraine. They also announced further collaboration on trade and technology. They also agreed to strengthen defense cooperation. Ramaphosa and Carney are said to have agreed to enhance economic cooperation between the two states, with Australian Prime Minister Albanese furthering partnerships on critical minerals was discussed. Both leaders vowed to deepen their bilateral relationship. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese will meet U.S. President Donald Trump for the first time in Calgary. On the sidelines of the G7 summit, talks are expected to focus on tariffs and the U.S. snap review of the AUKUS nuclear submarine deal with Australia. Now we move on to the Middle East. Israeli Defence Minister Katz warned Tehran residents will pay the price for Iranian missile attacks on Israeli civilians. He condemned Iran's strikes and vowed Israel's offensive will continue strongly. Iran's President Masoud Pezeshkian has called for national unity amid escalating Israeli strikes, urging all factions to set aside differences and stand together against what he called genocidal aggression. These statements come as Iran launched a fresh salvo of missiles on Israel, striking Tel Aviv, Haifa, and Jerusalem in the early hours of Monday. Israel's emergency services confirmed 5 dead and over 97 injured. One residential building in Haifa was hit directly. Sirens wailed as families took shelter in bunkers and subways. Fire broke out near a power plant in northern Israel. Missiles breached Israel's Iron Dome, damaging residential blocks in central cities. Iran's Revolutionary Guard say the strikes successfully hit targets in Israel. Officials warn of more devastating attacks to come. In response, Israel's Air Force struck Iran's Quds Force headquarters in Tehran. These sites were reportedly used to plan operations through proxies. The Israeli military also confirms strikes on surface-to-surface missile sites in central Iran. IDF jets remain active over Iranian airspace. Israel says the intelligence chief of Iran's Revolutionary Guards, Mohammad Kazemi, was killed in a targeted strike. Tehran says 224 people have died in Israeli strikes since Friday, most of them being civilians. Iran has accused Israel of attacking its foreign ministry. Iran refuses ceasefire talks while under Israeli attack, telling mediators it will only negotiate after completing its response. Tensions escalate as both sides launch new strikes. The region remains on high alert. The European Union Commission President Ursula von der Leyen says Iran must never acquire nuclear weapons. After speaking to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, she stressed both sides agree on that. She added a negotiated solution remains the best long-term path for peace. Here's what Ursula von der Leyen has said.
Iran should never acquire nuclear weapons. So in the call with Prime Minister Netanyahu, he described the situation. We were both, of course, aligned in the fact that Iran should not have nuclear weapons without any question. Of course, I think a negotiated solution is in the long term the best solution.
Meanwhile, U.S. President Donald Trump, before departing for the G7 summit, said Iran and Israel may need to fight it out before a deal can be reached, though he maintained that Washington continues to support Israel's right to defend itself. Here's what the U.S. president has said.
Well, I hope there's going to be a deal. I think it's time for a deal, and we'll see what happens, but sometimes they have to fight it out, but we're going to see what happens. I think there's a good chance there'll be a deal.
Have you asked Israel to pause their airstrikes into Iran?
Well, I don't want to say that.
A senior U.S. official confirmed Trump vetoed an Israeli plan to assassinate Iran's supreme leader Ali Khamenei. French President Emmanuel Macron dismissed the idea of Russia mediating, citing Moscow's ongoing violations in Ukraine. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer and Macron have also said their countries did not participate in Israel's operations against Iran. Here's what Starmer has said.
The conflict with Israel and Iran is centerpiece, and this provides the opportunity to talk to our co-leaders about the fast-moving situation and to make our strong case together that there must be de-escalation of this conflict in the interests of the region and of course, the world.
Chinese President Xi Jinping has left Beijing for Kazakhstan to attend the second China Central Asia Summit. The meeting will take place Tuesday in Astana. Leaders of Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, and Turkmenistan will also attend. Xi will hold several bilateral meetings before the summit. This is his third overseas trip this year. Following stops in Southeast Asia and Russia, China is pushing to expand its influence in Central Asia, a region rich in natural resources. Beijing's Belt and Road Initiative remains central to this strategy. The five nations are also seeking to move away from Russia and build new global partnerships. French President Emmanuel Macron has made a historic visit to Greenland, becoming the very first foreign head of state to set foot on the Arctic island since the Trump administration floated the idea of annexation. On arrival in the capital Nuuk, Macron stood alongside Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen and Greenland's leader Jens Frederik Nielsen, sending a clear message of unity. He called Trump's proposal not something done between allies and stressed France and the EU's solidarity with Greenland's sovereignty. Let's listen in.
Qu'est-ce qu'on peut faire si le président Trump décide, comme il l'envisage, d'annexer une côte?
Je pense que c'est pas ce qui se fait entre alliés. Et donc c'est important de montrer qu'il y a un engagement du Danemark, des Européens, autour de ce territoire qui présente des très grands enjeux stratégiques et mon intégrité territoriale doit...
Macron made it clear that Greenland is not for sale, not to be taken, and said the entire European Union agrees. He also pushed for stronger ties with Greenland on strategic metals, including rare earth minerals crucial to low-carbon energy technology. Let's listen in.
A message of support for your territorial integrity, your borders. In a few words, everybody think in France, in the European Union, that Greenland is not to be sold, not to be taken.
Speaking on global tensions, Macron urged calm in the ongoing Iran-Israel conflict. He called for a return to nuclear talks, but rejected the idea of Russia as a mediator, given its ongoing war in Ukraine. And looking ahead to the G7 summit, Macron said he plans to press President Trump on whether he's open to expanding sanctions against Russia over its actions in Ukraine. Let's listen in.
Les escalades à la reprise des discussions. J'ai pu hier m'entretenir avec le président d'Iran et j'ai appelé à ce que les discussions reprennent au plus vite. C'est aussi ce que j'ai fait dans mon échange avec le président Trump qui partage cette vision. Donc on aura l'occasion dans quelques heures d'y revenir avec les dirigeants du G7. Et j'espère que les prochaines heures ramèneront le calme et un chemin qui est celui de la discussion pour éviter qu'il y ait évidemment quelques escalades de nucléaire, l'acquisition de capacités nucléaires en Iran et surtout d'éviter qu'il y ait quelque embrasement que ce soit dans la région.
Je ne crois pas que la Russie, qui aujourd'hui est engagée dans un conflit de haute intensité, a décidé de ne pas respecter la Charte des Nations Unies depuis maintenant plusieurs années, puisse être en quoi que ce soit un médiateur. Je pense que c'est la responsabilité collective qui est la nôtre d'essayer de réengager au plus vite un conflit et donc dans un premier temps d'éviter toute escalade et que l'ensemble des protagonistes reviennent à la table des discussions. Et pour moi, le G7 doit avoir pour objectif de tous reconverger. Et donc pour l'Ukraine obtenir le plus tôt possible un cessez-le-feu qui permette de bâtir une paix robuste et durable. Et donc, à mes yeux, c'est la question de savoir si le président Trump est disponible à mettre en avant des sanctions beaucoup plus fortes à l'égard de la Russie si elle refusait de répondre à la proposition qu'il a fait depuis maintenant plusieurs mois et à laquelle a répondu le président Zelensky dès le mois de mars.
EU Chief Ursula von der Leyen says Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has pledged to increase humanitarian aid into Gaza. Speaking from the G7 summit in Canada, she urged Israel to let food and medical supplies reach Gazan civilians. Von der Leyen said she will track where the aid goes and whether it reaches those in need. The EU push comes amid global outrage over Israel's aid blockade earlier this year, which the UN says has put Gaza at risk of famine. The EU now sees a window for humanitarian and diplomatic progress in the midst of wider regional escalation.
insisted and urged that humanitarian aid that is not reaching Gaza has to go into Gaza. He promised that this is the case and that this will be the case. So I will be working, coming back home from G7, on having a close look at the facts, where our humanitarian aid is, how it reaches Gaza, whether it gets into Gaza, what we can do to make sure that humanitarian aid reaches the people in Gaza.
Meanwhile, Netanyahu announced a possible breakthrough in hostage talks. He said negotiations have been instructed to advance deals to free hostages held by Hamas. I won't give up on anyone, he said, promising to destroy Hamas while working to bring hostages home. Here's what the Israeli Prime Minister has said.
נתתי הנחיה שלשום לקדם את המשא ומתן, כי יש איזו פרצה שאני מזהה. לא מוותר על אף אחד. אבל אחרי שאנחנו נשלים את המלאכה, שתי המלאכות, גם השמדת החמאס, גם שחרור החטופים.
Now we move on to North America. U.S. President Donald Trump has ordered a sweeping deportation crackdown targeting Democratic-led cities including Los Angeles, Chicago, and New York. Trump posted on Truth Social that millions of illegal aliens reside in these cities, which he claimed are the core of the Democrat power center. He announced what he called the largest mass deportation drive in history, instructing ICE to do all in their power. He also deployed 4,000 National Guard troops and 700 Marines to Los Angeles, despite opposition from Californian officials who are now suing to block the move. In Los Angeles, days of protests against ICE raids have mostly remained peaceful. Though some violence has been reported, Mayor Karen Bass extended a nightly curfew, saying residents are living in fear and accusing the federal raids of being indiscriminate. Trump remains defiant, saying federal agents face threats from radical Democrats but will not be deterred. He says this is a fight to reverse mass destruction migration. Now we move on to Russia and Ukraine. Ukraine have launched a bold long-range strike deep inside Russia, hitting a drone factory in Yelabuga, Tatarstan, 1,000 kilometers from the border. The facility reportedly produced Iranian-designed Shahid drones used against Ukraine. Videos showed explosions at the site. Kyiv said the factory tested and launched drones that targeted Ukrainian energy and civilian infrastructure. Meanwhile, Ukraine's forces recaptured Andriivka in the Sumy region. President Zelensky confirmed the advance as Ukraine pushes back against Russian troop buildup. He said Russia has massed 53,000 soldiers near Sumy in a somber update. Ukraine also confirmed the return of 1,200 fallen soldiers' bodies from Russia. On the Russian side, Moscow struck back, targeting the Kremenchuk oil refinery in Ukraine's Poltava region. Russia's defense ministry claimed it hit a key fuel source for Ukrainian forces using drones and missiles. President Zelensky condemned the strike as a vile attack on energy infrastructure and noted it happened after U.S. calls to avoid hitting Russian energy sites. Russia also claimed gains in Donetsk, Sumy, and other areas, including taking control of Malinivka. Both sides report ongoing heavy fighting. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz confirmed the arrest of 57-year-old Vance Boulder for the killing of the Democratic state lawmaker Melissa Hortman and her husband, which he carried out while he was impersonating a police officer. Let's listen in to what the Minnesota governor had to say.
After a two-day manhunt, 2 sleepless nights, law enforcement have apprehended Vance Boulder. That's 48 hours that law enforcement involved in a complex and dangerous manhunt. Spent Father's Day away from their families to deliver justice for Melissa and Mark Hortman and their children who spent this Father's Day alone.
Authorities say Boulder also allegedly shot and wounded State Senator John Hoffman and his wife Yvette in their nearby home. He was charged with 2 counts of second-degree murder and 2 counts of second-degree attempted murder. Police recovered 3 AK-47 rifles, a 9mm handgun, and a list of public officials with their addresses from Boulder's SUV. Now we move on to Africa. 9 people were killed in a deadly attack in southwestern Niger. Suspected jihadists opened fire on passenger vehicles near the Burkina Faso border. Victims included a teacher. Another teacher was injured and taken to near Niamey. The attack happened Friday near Makalondi and Torodi. Local sources confirmed the civilian deaths. The area is part of Niger's volatile 3-border zone. The army continues to battle threats in the region. Authorities condemned the killings as a brutal act. The deadly assault highlights ongoing violence in the Sahel. Security forces remain on high alert amid rising jihadist activity. Now we move on to South America. A powerful 6.1 magnitude earthquake struck Peru just before noon on Sunday, shaking areas near Callao, close to the capital, Lima. 1 man died in Lima when a wall collapsed onto his car. 5 others were injured, according to Peru's Emergency Operations Center. The quake also triggered landslides across the capital, as seen in local TV footage. President Dina Boluarte urged calm, assuring citizens there was no tsunami threat. Authorities confirmed the tremor did not generate a tsunami warning. A major football match in Lima was suspended due to this quake. Peru lies on the Pacific's Ring of Fire, making it highly vulnerable to seismic activities. The country records over 100 earthquakes each year. This latest quake is a reminder of the region's ongoing seismic risks. Well, that's all we have time for. We will continue to bring more news updates from around the world.